Week 14 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. Another MVP type season it's been for Josh Allen. He's going out there more weeks than not, putting points on the board. And this week it's a slam dunk matchup versus one of the worst defenses in the league, where I think this could be a high scoring game between these two teams. But all season long, besides last week, Cincinnati really hasn't stopped anyone. And Josh Allen last week bounced back with a nice game at Pittsburgh. Number 2, Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. So Stafford, we know he's putting a lot of points on the board. He's up there as an MVP candidate to win it all this season for that. And last week it was 3 turnovers for Stafford. Obviously, he's a gunslinger, and at times that's going to happen. But it was also bad weather conditions and travel. Not a West Coast game to go to the Carolina Panthers. That's one of those games you throw it out, even though he did throw for 3 touchdowns still and had the 3 turnovers as Stafford. And this week in a matchup at the Arizona Cardinals, a defense that really can't stop anyone, and back in an indoor game, I think he goes out there and has a big game. Number 3, Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. Last week, Burrow returned to the lineup, where obviously he was out for a few months with the turf toe, and he made some good throws and still had to get the rust off a little bit. But this week at Buffalo, like I said, I believe this is going to be a high-scoring game. Joe Burrow still could go out there, let's say even at 70-75%, put points on the board, and especially when you got a wide receiver like Ja'Marr Chase, anything's possible putting points on the board quickly. And also, we'll see if T. Higgins returns in this game as well. Number 4, Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dak Prescott, he's having another monster year. And obviously, when you add a guy like George Pickens to the receiving room and Javonte Williams in the backfield, and draft a stud offensive lineman like Tyler Booker, things are going to come together and you're going to put numbers up. So this week, even if Amon Ross out for this Detroit Lion team, I think both teams are going to put a lot of points on the board. And obviously, that means a decent amount of fantasy points for both quarterbacks. Number 5, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Mahomes having a solid season, way better this year stats-wise than last season, even though the Chiefs, we know last year went 15-1 in the regular season, and right now they're fighting to get into the playoffs at 6-6 on the season. So this week, definitely a tough matchup. That's why I bumped them down just a bit as Mahomes. But every week, you should expect at least top 3, top 5 fantasy numbers. Even with Houston coming in, I think Mahomes will find a way to put up numbers, and his team pulls out this ball game. Number 6, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Jalen Hurts, his numbers have been steady for the most part. I know the last 2 weeks the Eagles lost at the Cowboys and then versus the Chicago Bears last week in that ball game on Black Friday. But Jalen Hurts, him and A.J. Brown are back on the same page, even though I think it's a little bit force-feeding Brown at times during these games. But the thing I want to see from Hurts is more running the football. We haven't seen a lot of designed runs for Jalen Hurts over the last few weeks. So maybe this week in a game where they want to set the tone early, and it's an indoor game at least, where they don't got to deal with the elements of the Chargers, we'll see him run a little bit more. Number 7, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. So Lamar Jackson, last week, he didn't look right at all, turning the football over left and right versus one of the worst defenses in the league of the Cincinnati Bengals. And he's another guy who I don't think's 100%. He's not running as much, definitely lost his step. And I just think that hamstring's not 100% for Jackson, where he missed multiple games early in the season with the injury, and also maybe some other nagging injuries he's dealing with as well. But this week versus the Steelers, a team he usually comes through against, I think he'll go out there, not have a monster game, but a pretty solid game, I still think. Number 8, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. So like I said, St. Brown, he might be out in this game for Jared Goff and this Lion team, and obviously one of the best receivers in the league and the number 1 target on this offense for Goff. But this Dallas Cowboy defense, I know they've improved over the last few weeks since they made the deals at the deadline for Quinnen Williams and Logan Wilson. But the last 2 games versus good offenses, they gave up 21 points to the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 12. And then Week 13 gave up 28 points to the Chiefs. At 2 high-scoring games, the Cowboys won. So this week, I think Goff, even like I said, if St. Brown's out, could go out there and put up some good numbers. Number 9, Jacoby Brissett of the Arizona Cardinals. So Brissett, it seems like weekly 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception is the worst case scenario you're going to get from Brissett. So this week the Los Angeles Rams coming in. Last week we saw Bryce Young and this offense throw the football all over this defense. And like I said, Brissett, he's dropping back 45, 50 times easily a game and making plays. And even a few weeks ago, set the most completions in a game with 47. So Brissett, he's throwing the football a whole lot. To have confidence in him is Arizona. And this offense runs way better with Brissett in there, with Trey McBride doing more and Marvin Harrison doing way more as well. Number 10, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. New Orleans coming in this week, and Baker Mayfield, we know he's not 100% with the left shoulder injury. Last week he got it out. He played a decent ball game, and the victory was Baker Mayfield for the Tampa Bay Bucs versus Jacoby Brissett and the Arizona Cardinals. So this week, like I said, New Orleans, not a great defense. Bucky Irvin back in the lineup. Mike Evans, I don't think he'll play this week, but in the next couple weeks, he'll return. And Baker Mayfield, I think, could be a viable option this week. Number 11, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. So last week, Detroit, that was selling out on the run, and Love had a big ball game with 4 touchdowns. And that's why I want to see more out of Jordan Love, stretching the field, using his deep ball, threading Christian Watson, Jaden Reed possibly returning to the lineup this week or next for this Green Bay Packer team, so that will help the receiving room. But like I said, Jordan Love, he's a good quarterback, I think. They run the football a little bit way too much sometimes, is this Green Bay Packer team, and we saw the upside with Love last week. So with the Bears coming in, and it's a Lambeau game where that weather don't affect Jordan Love in this offense, I think he could go out there once again, have a good performance. Number 12, Daniel Jones of the Indianapolis Colts. So Jones, he's gotten it out with a broken fibula, and he's showing toughness and trying to keep his team going and making the playoffs. So right now, this is a big division game at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Both these teams 8-4, tied for first in that division. So Daniel Jones, like I said, even with a broken fibula, is still going out there and being serviceable, anywhere from 18 to 20 fantasy points over the last few weeks. And this week in a potential high-scoring game, and at least in good weather in Jacksonville, I think he's a top 12 option. 13, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. So a couple things I'm going to take into consideration here. We know Herbert, not 100%. He's got the broken bones in his hand. He had the surgery on Monday with Justin Herbert. There's a good possibility he still plays. Well, we saw him play the remainder of that game, but the only thing in the pistol and the gun, he was in the rest of that game, where it makes it predictable at times, the play calling. And this week it's a tough matchup versus the Philadelphia Eagles. But the plus in this, you don't have to go outdoors and go on the road to Philly, where that hand would really numb up and there would have been a problem. So at least he's home indoors, and you don't have to deal with elements, but just a tough defense of the Eagles. And that's why he's dropped down the rankings this week. 14, Marcus Mariota of the Washington Commanders. So right now, Jaden Daniels, there is a possibility he plays, but I still think it's an outside shot. This Commander team, they're going nowhere this season. 3-9 on the season is with Washington Commander team. And Mariota last week, he showed toughness defenses in the league of the Denver Broncos. He forced that game to overtime. They had a chance to win it, but the ball was batted down. So Marcus Mariota, he's going to give you some rushing yards. This week they don't got to deal with the elements outdoors as well, where last week was bad weather in Washington. And I think in Minnesota, he could go out there and be a solid option for fantasy owners. 15, Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. So week where you just don't know what Bo Nix you're going to get. Last week he didn't do much until late in that game with a couple big plays. Cortland Sutton had a 31-yard grab. Evan Ingram a 41-yard grab down the field, which with 2 big plays for this Denver Bronco team. But this week, I think the defense is going to carry them in this one in Vegas. And I think the run game with R.J. Harvey is going to have a nice game, where I don't see Bo Nix having to throw the football a whole lot and making a lot of plays. So that's why he's down this week. 16, Sam Darnold of the Seattle Seahawks. He's banged up a little bit with an ankle injury. Last week it was all defense and the running game putting points on the board, and Jason Myers kicking the football for the Seattle Seahawks team. But this week it is a good matchup with the Atlanta Falcons, a defense that really can't stop anyone. And we've seen Sam Darnold have some big games this season. So this week, indoor game, fast track versus a mediocre to bad defense, and with his defense putting him in good positions most likely once again. I think Darnold as a back-end option ain't a bad play. 17, Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. So this Bear offense, in terms of the receiving game, all the numbers have dropped off over the last few weeks, but the running game is putting up big numbers with the DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai backfield tandem over there in Chicago. And also as well, defense is coming out and playing, and Cairo Santos has been one of the more efficient kickers this season. So this week it's definitely a tough matchup at Lambeau Field. I know weather shouldn't really be a problem for Caleb. We're obviously Soldier Field, and these colder months, November and December, can get just as brutal out there as Lambeau Field. So this week at Green Bay, I just think it's going to be a ball game in the trenches between these two teams. And also as well, Green Bay's a top 5 defense this season. 18, Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the last few weeks, he's definitely putting up good numbers as Trevor Lawrence. He's more confident in getting that football down the field. And when you added a guy like Jacoby Myers, he was a good addition to this offense. Brenton Strange He returned to the lineup a couple weeks ago as well. He's playing good football. So with those factors and a potential high-scoring game and a home game for this Jaguar team, I think Trevor Lawrence, once again, he could go out there and score in that 17 to 22-point range. 19 Tyrod Taylor of the New York Jets. So this New York Jet offense is definitely better with Tyrod Taylor in their quarterback. It's more consistent, this offense. He's making plays with young wide receivers. We just traded to this Jet team 3-4 weeks ago, and Adonai Mitchell and John Mechie, and they're going out there making plays with Garrett Wilson out. And Breece Hall has played better with Taylor in the offense. So this week with the Miami Dolphins coming in, and last week Taylor had a good game, over 20 fantasy points. I think he could go out there versus defense and be a good option in 2 quarterback leagues. And the 20th and final quarterback I'm ranking is Tyler Shough of the New Orleans Saints. So Shough's definitely gotten a little bit better and made some progress in his rookie season over the last 6-7 weeks since he was named the starter. I know going back early in the season in his first start versus Tampa Bay Buck defense, he couldn't do anything where they were held down to 3 points. But Chris Olave is playing great football this season. Juwan Johnson, he's been one of the more consistent tight ends in the league. And we saw Devon Vele have a breakout game last week where he's a 6'7", 6'8" wide receiver that can make some plays. So they got some guys over there in this offense. Is this New Orleans Saints team, and we know they're going to be trailing in this game. So Tyler Shough, there could be a lot of garbage time in this one for him. So that's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.